Unaware I just signed a billion-dollar deal. My husband removed my name from our joint account after believing his mistress's lies. He didn't just hurt her, he erased her. On the same day, Elena Hale quietly became the CTO of a billion-dollar tech company. Her husband stood across from her at a crowded brunch table, let his mistress drop a fake bank statement in front of everyone, and before the day was over, he removed her name from their joint account like she was a stranger. That morning, Elena had walked out of a glass office with a sealed folder in her bag and a tired, hopeful smile on her face. At 32, after years of coding alone in a small home office, she had finally signed the deal that changed everything. Halo Mind AI, acquired for over $1 billion. Only a few people knew. Her husband wasn't one of them. He didn't ask why her hands were shaking or why she seemed so quiet. Instead, he listened to Sienna, the stylish friend, who stood at that brunch table and said, "Marcus, she's been moving money behind your back. I can prove it." In front of coworkers, in front of his own brother, he let another woman call his wife a thief. He let a fake screenshot speak louder than the woman who stood beside him for years. And while Elena stood outside later, hands shaking, trying to breathe through the humiliation, her phone lit up with a cold notification. AC count access removed. He thought she was desperate now. He thought she had nothing. What he never knew was that the big secret deal he feared was real, and it had just made her more powerful than he could ever imagine. This is not just a story about a husband who believed his mistress. It's about what happens when the woman you erase is the one who owns the system you depend on. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Elena's voice be silenced all over again. When you click that button, you stand with every person who was doubted, betrayed, and still chose to rise. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. The morning did not start quietly. It erupted with pressure, focus, and a kind of sharp energy that only comes when a life is about to change. Elena Hale, 32 years old, brilliant software engineer and founder of a small but fiercely innovative AI startup, sat surrounded by the glow of two large monitors. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was sharp. Every movement of her fingers across the keyboard carried the weight of years of dedication. On the left monitor, thousands of lines of code scrolling. On the right, a live prediction graph generated by her adaptive AI system, her life's work. But today was not like any other day. Today she had just finished signing the final documents for a monumental deal. A deal the world didn't know about. A deal her husband didn't know about. Her company, Halo Mind AI, had been quietly acquired by one of the largest tech corporations in the country. A deal valued at $1.07 billion. She wasn't just being bought out, she had negotiated a controlling role, chief technology officer of the parent corporation and owner of the core intellectual property. But because of strict confidentiality clauses, Elena couldn't announce anything until the corporation publicly released the news. Those papers, signed only hours ago, sat in a sealed folder on her desk, heavy not just with ink but with her entire future. Her cursor blinked on the final model adjustment. She smiled softly. She had built this technology from the ground up. Every algorithm, every data set, every model. She didn't inherit money. She didn't come from privilege. She built everything with grit. At 15, she worked in a community center after school. There, in a dusty corner, sat an old donated desktop. Half the keys stuck. The monitor flickered. But that computer became her escape. She taught herself C++ because the center's printer broke and no one else could fix it. She learned machine learning because she found an outdated college textbook someone had thrown away. She built her first prediction script at 17, and at 19, she sold a basic algorithm to a tutoring website for $300. That money allowed her to buy her own used laptop. Everything she owned now came from lines of code she wrote alone at midnight, with borrowed electricity and hope. A soft voice from behind broke her focus. Marcus Hale, 34, her husband tired uniform, rough hands, shoulders slumped from a physically demanding job, walked into the room. Marcus was kind at times, proud at times, and insecure almost always. He didn't understand technology. He didn't understand code. And because he didn't understand it, he underestimated it and her. He stared at her monitors and smirked. "Still playing with your little programs?" The sentence was playful in tone, but dismissive in weight, the kind that sinks into a person slowly, not like a blade but like ice. Elena didn't respond right away. She loved Marcus. She supported him when he changed jobs 3 times. She paid bills during the months he struggled. She encouraged him when he doubted himself. She was his quiet anchor. But his tone this morning felt different, sharper, colder. She finally answered, calm and respectful. I'm finishing the adaptive model. The prediction accuracy jumped to 98%. It's ready. Marcus didn't look impressed. He didn't know that accuracy level alone would change entire industries. He didn't know that her work was the reason a billion-dollar corporation had spent 6 months negotiating behind layers of NDA. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle but distracted. His phone buzzed loudly on the counter. He reached for it quickly, too quickly, shielding the screen with the back of his hand. Something inside Elena tightened. She softly turned her head and caught the last second of the notification. A name flashed across the screen. Sienna. Elena blinked. Her eyebrows lowered slightly. She didn't know a Sienna. Marcus had never mentioned anyone by that name. A strange silence filled the room, not heavy enough to call attention to itself, but unsettling enough to make her heart pause. Marcus cleared his throat and slid the phone into his pocket. It's just work, he said, voice a little too fast, a little too rehearsed. Work? Marcus didn't have coworkers named Sienna. He didn't have projects involving Sienna. He didn't even like chatting with anyone outside his small circle. Something was off. But Elena didn't confront him. Not yet. Not today. Not on the day she had signed away her company for a billion-dollar future he knew nothing about. Her mind drifted to the sealed folder on her desk, the deal that would change everything. Her life was about to shift into a world she had earned through sweat and sacrifice. And yet the man she loved stood only a few feet away, hiding messages from a woman she had never heard of. She turned back to her screen, but her fingers hovered in midair. Marcus walked toward the hallway as his phone buzzed again. This time, Elena couldn't see the message, but she heard Marcus whisper under his breath, "She still doesn't know." Elena's heart stopped. Know what? Her eyes narrowed. The air felt thinner. A quiet storm started building behind her ribs, slow, calm, dangerous. She didn't know it yet, but the woman whose name flashed on that screen would soon stand in front of her, smiling sweetly while tearing her marriage apart with lies. Elena would see Sienna not on a phone screen this time, but in person, looking straight at her. The day began with tension so sharp it felt like the air itself had teeth. Marcus Hale, 34, unusually cheerful and overly bright, stood in the doorway of Elena's home office. His smile was too wide, his tone too excited, and it hit Elena like a cold wave the moment he spoke. "Elena," he said, clapping his hands together, "my team is having a celebration brunch today. You should come. Everyone keeps asking about you." His excitement didn't feel natural. It felt rehearsed. Forced. Like a man acting in a play he didn't audition for. Elena Hale, 32, paused mid-keystroke. Her instinct tightened. Something about the way he lingered in the doorway, the way his shoulders shifted, made her chest grow tense. She studied his face, not looking for danger, but trying to understand the sudden invitation. Marcus rarely asked her to join his work events. He always said she wouldn't fit in, because people in his industry didn't understand tech talk. So, why today? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. It was Ava, her best friend since high school. Ava Reed, 33, warm-hearted, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective of Elena. Ava's message appeared on the screen. "You're too quiet. What happened?" Elena stepped into the hallway to call her. Ava picked up instantly. "Talk to me." Elena explained the sudden brunch invitation, Marcus's strange enthusiasm, and the tension from earlier when she saw the name Sienna on his phone. Ava inhaled slowly. "Elena, why do I feel like he's setting you up for something? This isn't normal Marcus behavior?" Elena didn't want to agree, but her gut whispered the same thing. Still, she tried to give Marcus the benefit of the doubt. The morning had been heavy. She didn't want to start a fight without understanding the full truth. "I'll just go," Elena said softly. "Maybe I'm overthinking." Ava's voice dropped. "Just promise me you won't ignore the signs." Elena didn't answer, because deep inside, she already felt the shift. Marcus drove them to the brunch venue, talking too quickly, laughing too loudly, trying too hard to act like everything was fine. Elena nodded politely at his stories, but her mind wasn't on the words. She felt a quiet storm forming behind each mile they drove, a storm she didn't yet understand. When they entered the venue, the noise of clinking glasses and cheerful conversations filled the air. Marcus walked beside her proudly, almost performative in the way he held her hand. "Elena, everyone's here," he said with a strange flourish, guiding her deeper inside. But Elena wasn't looking at the guests. Her eyes were drawn to the woman standing near the center of the room, Sienna. Sienna Cross, 29, consultant, stylish, perfectly polished, with the kind of beauty that demanded attention. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were cold, calculated. Elena didn't recognize her, not really, but she recognized something else. The subtle hostility behind the smile, the silent challenge, the quiet confidence of someone who believes she has already won. Jason Hale, 31, Marcus's younger brother, stood off to the side. He looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. Jason had always been kind to Elena, gentle in a way Marcus wasn't. He lifted 2 fingers in a small greeting, but his gaze flicked between Marcus and Sienna with concern. Elena's instinct sharpened again. Something was wrong. Marcus squeezed her shoulder a little too tightly. "Elena," he said proudly, "I want you to meet someone." Sienna stepped forward with a smile that looked soft but felt sharp. "Elena," Sienna said, extending her hand gracefully, "I've heard so much about you." Her voice was honey, her eyes were knives. As their hands met, Elena felt something inside her shift, a quiet alarm ringing, something warning her that this woman wasn't a stranger. She was a threat. Jason looked away, jaw tightening. Marcus stood behind Elena with the tense excitement of a man hiding something. And Sienna, she held Elena's gaze with an intensity that said, "I know something you don't." Elena's breath thinned. She couldn't explain it, but her mind flashed back to the message notification she saw earlier. Sienna. Her name wasn't just familiar. It was connected to Marcus, deeply, dangerously. Elena pulled her hand back slowly. "Nice to meet you," she said. Though tension made the words stiff, Sienna's smile widened, almost triumphant. And in that moment, Elena understood something without hearing a single explanation. This meeting wasn't an accident. It was intentional, planned, a setup. As the room settled into awkward silence, Sienna leaned closer, her voice a soft whisper only Elena could hear. "Today, you're going to learn a lot." Elena's heart froze. Chaos didn't arrive quietly, it exploded in an instant. Just as Elena Hale, 32, took her seat at the long brunch table, a sharp clink of glass cut through the chatter. Every head turned. Sienna Cross, 29, consultant with an ice-polished smile and a confidence built on deception, tapped her spoon against her mimosa glass like she was preparing to make a toast. But her eyes were locked on Elena. Sienna inhaled dramatically, placing one hand on her chest as if she were burdened by truth. "I wasn't going to say anything," she said loudly, looking around the table. "But Marcus deserves honesty, even if it's painful." The room fell still. Marcus Hale, 34, Elena's husband, shifted in his seat, legs stiff, jaw tight, yet wearing the expression of a man expecting applause for courage he didn't earn. Elena's heart thumped once hard. Sienna turned fully toward her, voice smooth and falsely sympathetic. "Elena," she continued, "we know you've been moving money without telling Marcus." The words hit the table like a grenade. A few co-workers exchanged shocked glances. Jason Hale, 31, Marcus's younger brother, froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at Elena with confusion, not accusation, but concern. Elena felt her breath stumble. "What?" Sienna reached into her purse with theatrical slowness and pulled out a sheet of paper. She placed it gently in front of Elena, palms open as if she were offering evidence to a court. A printed screenshot, bank transfer details, Elena's name, large amounts of money, a private account number she had never seen before. Elena stared. The numbers blurred. Her mind refused to connect the dots because none of it was true. Marcus leaned in, arms crossed. He nodded stiffly. "Elena, I didn't want her to say anything, but you left me no choice. His voice stung worse than the accusation. She whispered, Marcus, you believe this? He didn't answer with words. He just looked down, jaw clenched, like a guilty man pretending to be the betrayed one. Sienna wasn't finished. She stepped closer to Elena, too close, and rested her palm on Marcus's shoulder, marking her territory with a gesture Elena wasn't supposed to see, but did. Elena, Sienna said, her tone shifting into something darker. Marcus showed me your messages. My what? Elena whispered, confused. Sienna smiled, victorious. The ones where you said you were planning to leave him. Once your big secret deal went through. Elena's blood ran cold. Her secret deal, that billion-dollar acquisition she couldn't legally talk about yet, was something only a few people knew about. And she never said those words to Marcus. Never. The betrayal sliced through her chest. A quick flash of memory. Marcus sitting with Sienna in a dimly lit room weeks ago. A quick flash of memory. Marcus sitting with Sienna in a dimly lit room weeks ago, venting about Elena's intelligence, about feeling lesser, about not understanding her work. Sienna recording him secretly. Sienna twisting his words into a believable narrative. Her voice whispering manipulation. She hides things. She doesn't respect you. You deserve someone honest. Sienna used Marcus's insecurity as fuel, used his complaints as ingredients for her lies, created fake messages piece by piece, made herself the trustworthy one. Back at the table, Jason's fork finally dropped. He looked at Marcus, eyes narrowing, silently asking, Are you sure about this? The co-workers stared in uncomfortable silence. Elena struggled to breathe. Her voice trembled. Marcus, you showed her messages that I never wrote? Marcus didn't look at her. Guilt flickered quickly buried. Sienna leaned closer, making sure everyone could hear the next words. Women like you, she whispered with a smile, always get caught. The table fell dead silent. Every sound, every breath disappeared. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to let a tear fall. Not here, not in front of them. Her hands shook as she pushed her chair back. Without a word, she stood. Without looking at Marcus. Without responding to Sienna. Without defending herself because the truth didn't matter to people who already chose their lies. She walked away slowly, each step heavier than the last, her heart breaking in a way that couldn't be heard but felt everywhere in her body. The silence she left behind hurt more than shouting ever could. Jason watched her go, guilt pulling at his expression. A few co-workers exchanged uneasy glances, uncertain now, sensing something deeper beneath the surface. And Marcus, he didn't follow her. As Elena reached the exit, she heard Sienna's voice behind her, low but unmistakable. By the end of today, he'll know everything. Elena froze mid-step. That sentence would soon tie directly to the next blow waiting for her, the one that would shatter her trust beyond repair. Elena didn't walk out of the brunch venue, she escaped it. The moment the door shut behind her, the world slammed into her chest. Her breath fractured, her hands shook uncontrollably. The humiliation she had swallowed at the table cold, sharp, merciless, now rose up inside her like a scream she couldn't let out. She rushed into a quiet corner behind the building, pressing her back against the wall, fighting for air. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from inside echoed cruelly in her ears. Sienna's words replayed. Women like you always get caught. Marcus's silence replayed harder. Her heart felt like it was collapsing under the weight of betrayal she hadn't earned. Her phone vibrated in her trembling hand. Ava Reed, 33, her best friend, answered the call before it could ring twice. Elena? What happened? Talk to me. Elena's voice cracked. Why would he believe her, Ava? Why didn't he ask me first? She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the ground, knees pulled to her chest. Her usually calm, logical mind spun out of control. She tried to steady her breathing, but every inhale hit the question again. Why didn't he ask me first? Ava's voice softened. Elena, what exactly did they say? Elena choked on the memory. She accused me of moving money, right in front of everyone. And Marcus, he just sat there, Ava. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. Ava inhaled sharply. Elena, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. The words landed with painful clarity. Suddenly, Elena felt the weight of years pressing down on her chest. Clips of her life with Marcus flickered like old film. Sitting with him late at night, rewriting his resume when he lost his job using her savings to cover rent. The month he fell behind, cheering for him when he failed an exam, and wanted to quit waking early to pack him lunch during his first week at a new job holding. Quit him when he cried from stress, forgiving him during mood swings, promising herself things would get better. She had been steadfast. She had been committed. She had chosen him every single time. Now he believed a stranger's lie over her truth. Her breaths became smaller, thinner. She wiped the tear that slid down her face, angry that it escaped. For a moment she closed her eyes. And then another flash. A different memory. One from just a week ago. She sat in a sleek office across from Daniel Cho, the mergers and acquisitions lawyer handling the sale of her company. He was calm, professional, early 40s, with the personality of someone who had seen everything and feared nothing. Daniel leaned forward and said in a measured voice, "Once the acquisition is signed, keep things quiet until we announce. You're about to hold one of the most valuable positions in the tech world. Protect it." Elena had nodded, not realizing those words would soon collide violently with Marcus's insecurity and Sienna's lies. Back in the present, Elena opened her eyes slowly, breathing steadier now. Not calm, but controlled. Ava's voice came through the phone again, gentle but fierce. "Elena, listen. Whatever they're doing, it's planned. Sienna didn't make up that attack on the spot. Marcus went along with it because she's feeding him something he wants to believe. You need to protect yourself." Elena didn't respond, because at that exact moment, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ava. It was a notification from her banking app. The words lit up her screen like a final blow. "Account, access, removed." Elena stared at the message. Her entire body went cold. Her fingers loosened. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the ground. Ava heard the sound. "Elena? What happened?" "Elena?" Elena whispered the words she could barely form. "He cut me off. Marcus removed my access." Ava gasped. "Oh my God. Elena, he's not confused. He's choosing Sienna's lies over you." Elena inhaled deeply, one slow breath that seemed to reset something inside her. Her shaking stopped. Her eyes sharpened. A shift. Not loud, not explosive. Quiet, focused. This wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was awakening. Ava spoke again, voice trembling with emotion. "Elena, come home. We need to figure out the next step." Elena picked up her phone, wiping the dirt from the screen. But when she stood, she didn't walk toward home. She turned in the opposite direction with purpose in her steps. Because if Marcus wanted to believe lies, then she needed to speak to the one person who knew the truth behind her secret deal. The one person who warned her about being quiet. "Daniel," Elena whispered to herself, voice steady now. "I need a lawyer." And as she walked away, the sun caught the sealed folder in her bag, the billion-dollar deal Marcus never imagined she had. Elena didn't knock. She pushed the glass door open with a force she didn't know she had. The intensity hit the room instantly. Daniel Cho, 44, a calm, razor-sharp corporate lawyer with a reputation for handling high-stakes tech acquisitions, stood the moment he saw her. He had been expecting confusion or nervous excitement about the deal, but not this, certainly not the storm in her eyes. "Elena," he said carefully, "did he finally cross the line?" Elena didn't trust her voice yet. She moved forward, shoulders squared, posture strong despite the redness around her eyes. She reached into her bag with trembling hands and placed the printed screenshot on his desk, the same lie Sienna used to humiliate her just hours ago. Daniel looked at it once and exhaled slowly, disappointment and anger mixing behind his usually controlled expression. "Sit," he said softly. She did. For a moment, silence hung between them. Not an empty silence, but the heavy kind that signals the start of a war. A second door inside the office opened, and Victor Hale, 38, Forensic accountant, not related to Marcus despite the last name, stepped out holding a tablet. He specialized in uncovering financial fraud and digital tampering. Daniel nodded toward him. Victor, take a look. Victor sat across from Elena, studied the screenshot, and his eyebrows shot upward almost instantly. It's altered, he said plainly. Elena blinked hard. She knew it was a lie, but hearing a professional confirm, it cracked something open inside her. Victor continued, pointing at the page. Look here, misaligned pixelation on the account details, inconsistent timestamp formatting, and most importantly, the system tracking ID is missing. No real bank transfer is processed without that ID. This is a fake. His tone was clinical, certain, unshakable. Elena swallowed, emotions tight in her throat. How did she do this? Victor leaned back. Someone with enough motivation can modify a screenshot. But whoever did this wasn't a professional. They got sloppy. Sloppy. Just like Sienna's smirk. Just like Marcus's blind belief. Daniel's jaw tightened. Elena, he said gently, Sienna didn't just lie. She planned this. Marcus gave her access to just enough information to create a believable narrative. Elena closed her eyes briefly. The memory of Marcus nodding at the brunch table burned through her chest again. She steadied her breath. Daniel continued, shifting the conversation. And now we need to talk about your deal. Elena opened her eyes. This part still didn't feel real, not after the emotional destruction of the morning. Daniel slid a folder toward her, the same type of sealed folder she had at home. Elena, your acquisition was finalized this morning. As of today, you are the CTO of a billion-dollar tech corporation. You own the core intellectual property behind HaloMind AI, Victor added, and you have more leverage than Marcus or Sienna can imagine. Daniel looked directly into her eyes. And Marcus has no idea, correct? Elena nodded slowly. No idea. He doesn't understand my work. He never asked. Daniel's tone softened. You held back because of the NDA, not because you were hiding anything. Elena felt a quiet strength begin to return. Not loud, not angry, just solid, like a foundation rebuilding itself. A light on Daniel's desk phone began flashing an incoming call. It's Linda, Daniel said. Linda Perez, 41, divorce and family law specialist, joined the meeting via speaker. Her voice was smooth, professional, and carried the calm authority of someone who had guided many people out of emotional storms. Elena, Linda said, Daniel updated me. Cutting you off financially based on fabricated evidence is grounds for immediate legal action. Emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and conspiracy to defraud are all relevant. Elena listened, letting the words steady her breathing. Linda continued, You hold significant assets now. You are not powerless. You are in a position of strength. Elena pressed her lips together, nodding slowly. Daniel leaned forward. Elena, you get to decide what happens next. There was a brief silence. Then Linda asked the question that split the room in two. Elena, do you want quiet justice or public justice? The air froze. Elena lifted her chin, not shaking, not unsure anymore. Her voice was quiet, but powerful. Both. Victor exchanged a look with Daniel. They understood exactly what that meant. Daniel closed the folder with a soft click and said, Then we begin today. Outside Daniel's office window, the city lights reflected off the glass, sharp, cold, and full of the kind of truth that could ruin the people who betrayed her. The tension in the conference room hit Elena the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anxiety, it was power, quiet, controlled, and pointed directly at her. The walls were glass, the table long and polished, and the air felt like the start of something irreversible. At the head of the table sat Howard Grant, 58, chairman of the corporation that had just acquired HaloMind AI. His reputation was legendary, sharp, decisive, a man who built tech giants with a calm smile and an uncompromising mind. He rose to greet Elena. Elena, he said with real respect, your work will change everything. The intensity of his words struck her like a wave. Days earlier, her husband had chosen a stranger's lies over her truth. Now she stood in a room where the world's top executives treated her like the center of gravity. To Howard's right sat Caroline Brooks, 35, the company's PR director, smart eyes, quick mind, already typing the draft statement that would introduce Elena as the new CTO. Across from her, Natalie Pierce, 40, corporate mediator and contract specialist, organized folders of documents for Elena to sign. And beside Elena, steady and supportive, sat Daniel Cho, 44, her corporate lawyer, the same man who had promised hours earlier that power was already in her hands. The contrast between these rooms, this one and the brunch that tore her open, felt almost unreal. Howard took his seat and gestured for Elena to sit. She did, straight-backed, composed, her hands folded neatly on the table. But inside, the morning's humiliation still burned like a wound. Howard opened a file. Elena, before we finalize the announcement, we want to walk through the indirect impact your adaptive AI will have across multiple industries. Caroline nodded, pulling up a presentation on the large monitor. Lines appeared connecting industries to Halamine's technology: security, logistics, automation, and then something unexpected. Howard tapped a line that extended toward a manufacturing and supply company, the same field Marcus worked in. Your predictive engine powers the software they use to schedule production, he said. Without your system's renewal, their operations slow by 40%. Elena's breath caught. Daniel leaned forward. Meaning? Howard answered plainly. Meaning your work keeps many companies, including your husband's employer, running smoothly. And once you're announced as CTO, your decisions will shape all future renewals. Not revenge. Not yet. Simply truth. Truth that shifted the ground beneath her feet. Elena absorbed it quietly. Marcus thought she was powerless. He believed lies because they fit his insecurity. But here she held leverage he never imagined. Caroline clicked to the next slide. Elena, once we release the announcement, your name will dominate tech headlines. Investors will watch you closely. Competitors will attempt to contact you. It's a new life. Elena's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something deeper. Strength, self-recognition, worth. Natalie slid the signature pages toward her. These finalize your position, title, and authority to make binding decisions for the tech division. Elena held the pen. Her hand did not shake. For a moment, everything slowed the memory of Sienna whispering, "Women like you always get caught." Marcus nodding at lies, the humiliation that cut her open. And now, she was the woman whose work powered industries. The woman positioned to decide the future of systems her husband's workplace depended on. The woman he underestimated. She signed each page with steady strokes. Caroline looked up from her laptop, eyes bright. Elena, one question remains. She turned the screen toward her. Do we publish your announcement today? The room fell quiet. Elena looked down at her wedding ring, once a promise, now a symbol of betrayal. She touched it lightly, then lifted her hand away from it. Her voice was soft, but firm enough to shift the air. Yes. Howard nodded with satisfaction. Daniel leaned back, proud. Caroline's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Just before Caroline clicked publish, Elena whispered, "Let the truth speak before I ever do." Outside the conference room, the city hummed, ready to watch her name rise and ready to watch someone else's world fall. The explosion didn't come from fire or sound. It came from the moment Marcus Hale opened his mouth. The workroom was buzzing the next morning. Equipment humming, keyboards clicking, co-workers moving through their routines. And in the middle of it all stood Marcus, 34, loud, smug, and drunk on the false power he believed he held. He laughed loudly as he leaned against a desk, telling the same story he had repeated since brunch. "I finally put Elena in her place," he bragged, thumping his chest lightly. "She thinks she's smarter than everyone. But Sienna helped me open my eyes. You should have seen her face. She didn't even try to deny it." Co-workers exchanged uneasy looks. Some nodded awkwardly. Others looked confused. But Marcus didn't notice the discomfort. He was too busy believing he had won something. A few steps behind him, Jason Hale, 31, his younger brother, watched silently. Jason had been troubled since the brunch. He didn't trust Sienna. He didn't trust the evidence. He didn't trust the way Marcus embraced those lies so easily. But he didn't say anything. Not yet. A moment later, the sound of heels approached the sharp, delicate rhythm belonging only to Sienna Cross, 29, the mistress hiding behind false sweetness and perfectly curated confidence. She entered the room with her usual performance-ready grace. "Marcus," she said tenderly, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you okay? I know this morning must have been hard for you." "Hard for him." Jason's jaw tightened. Marcus leaned into her touch like a man who believed he had found his savior. "She showed her true colors," he said proudly. "And I didn't let her get away with it." Sienna nodded, with exaggerated sympathy. "You did the right thing. Some women pretend to be innocent while hiding so much." The room felt wrong, cold, twisted. Jason turned away, unable to watch. And then it happened. A gasp. Then another. Then a clatter as someone dropped their phone. The entire room shifted from chatter to stunned silence in under 3 seconds. Co-workers stared at their screens with widened eyes, whispering urgently, "What is that? No way. Is this real?" Marcus frowned. "What's going on?" Before anyone could answer, Ethan Ward, 42, one of the company's investors and longtime friend of Marcus's manager, rushed toward him. Ethan was breathless, jaw hanging open, phone gripped tightly in his hand. "Marcus, you need to see this." Marcus laughed, assuming it was a meme or some joke. "Relax. It can't be that serious." Ethan shoved the phone into his hands. The headline glowed on the screen like a lightning strike. AI innovator Elena Hale signs billion-dollar acquisition deal, appointed CTO. Marcus's smile collapsed. His knees almost buckled. His breath hitched like he'd been punched. He read it again. And again. Billion-dollar. Elena Hale, CTO. The room spun. Sienna's eyes widened fear, replacing confidence. Panic replacing poise. She stepped back, her lips parted slightly as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Co-workers whispered louder now. "Your wife is a billionaire? She invented that technology? She's CTO now? Dude, what did you do?" Jason stepped forward, voice calm but heavy with truth. "You made a mistake, Marcus." Marcus shook his head urgently, almost violently. No, she lied. She hid things. But the words tumbled into nothing. Every accusation he had believed, every lie Sienna fed him, now shattered under the weight of Elena's accomplishment. A woman he discarded. A woman he humiliated. A woman he believed was beneath him. Suddenly, Sienna grabbed Marcus's arm, but not with affection this time. It was fear. She whispered sharply, "Marcus, you lied to me." He jerked back, stunned. "What? I lied to you?" Sienna's eyes darted around, calculating, desperate. "You told me she was some weak wife, that she was nothing, that she was holding you back. But she's a billionaire? A CTO? You didn't tell me she signed a deal." Marcus swallowed hard. "I didn't know." Sienna stepped even farther away, trembling with anger. Co-workers watched, stunned and silent. The mistress, the husband, the lies unraveling in real time. Sienna whispered one last line, soft, sharp, cutting straight through Marcus's collapsing world. "If she has this much power, what do you think she'll do next?" At that very moment, Marcus's phone buzzed with a new notification, one that would pull the rug out from under him a second time and lead directly into the investigation waiting in the next scene. The chaos didn't wait. It arrived with force. Marcus Hale, 34, sat stiffly in a small HR conference room at work, hands sweating on the table as two suited men with briefcases took seats across from him. The machines outside still hummed, but in here, the air felt heavy, machines still humming, co-workers staring, the energy shifting like a storm had walked in disguised as men with briefcases. One of the men opened a folder. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming. We need to review some financial activity connected to your joint accounts." "Now." Marcus's throat tightened. "What? Why?" "I didn't." But his words meant nothing, because behind the investigators stepped Victor Hale, 38, forensic accountant, the same man who had exposed Sienna's fake screenshot in Daniel's office. He was not related to Marcus, but shared the surname by coincidence. His face was calm, controlled, yet held the sharpness of someone who knew exactly why he was there. Victor lifted a folder. "We completed our audit, Mr. Hale. There are irregularities involving marital accounts, irregularities that connect directly to personal spending you cannot explain." Sienna Cross, 29, who had followed Marcus into the office earlier to support him, stiffened instantly. Her breath hitched as Victor continued. "These include luxury hotel stays, private transfers, jewelry receipts, and recurring payments to a personal account belonging to Miss Sienna Cross." The room snapped into electric silence. Co-workers stared with wide eyes, some shocked, some whispering behind their hands. Jason Hale, 31, Marcus's younger brother, stood in the corner staring at the ground as if trying to hold himself together. Marcus's face drained of color. "That's not I didn't, there must be some mistake." But he could barely speak the words because deep inside, he knew exactly what they were referring to, and he knew Elena would never make anything up. She was too honest, too gentle, too painfully loyal. Sienna stepped back, her perfect posture faltering. Victor placed a document in front of Marcus. "These transactions were made using funds from accounts shared with your wife. She has filed an inquiry through her legal team. The bank and your wife's legal team requested this review, and your employer has agreed to cooperate fully." Marcus shook his head violently. "No, Elena wouldn't do this. She must have misunderstood." Victor's expression didn't change. She didn't misunderstand. She saw the evidence. Sienna's face twisted, panic blooming across her carefully made features. The walls she had built with lies were collapsing faster than she could process. And then something snapped in her. "No," she whispered, stepping back even farther. "No, this isn't fair. I didn't force you to spend that money. You wanted to impress me, Marcus. You bought those things willingly." Co-workers gasped. Jason looked up sharply. Victor remained still, like someone watching a predictable movie unfold. Marcus spun toward Sienna, eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about? You told me." Sienna cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You told me she was nothing, that she was a burden. You told me you wanted someone who actually cared about you." She pointed at him with shaking hands. "You said she didn't deserve your money." Marcus's face twisted in horror. He reached toward her. "Sienna, stop please." But she was far from finished. A quick flash of memory filled her mind. Sienna in her apartment arguing with a debt collector on the phone. Bills piled on her kitchen counter. Her voice trembling as she said, "Just give me more time, please." Her eyes scanning a text from Marcus offering dinner, comfort, attention, money. Sienna never loved him. He was her way out. And now the door was slamming shut. Back in the present, Sienna's breaths turned manic. "If I go down," she hissed, "you go down." Victor's calm voice cut the air. "That will not change the facts, Miss Cross. You both benefited from misused funds." Sienna's eyes darted wildly. Then without warning, she turned and ran toward the exit. Co-workers jumped aside as she shoved through them, heels clacking across the floor. Marcus lunged forward desperately. "Sienna, don't you dare leave. Get back here." But she didn't stop. She fled the building, disappearing into sunlight that felt far too bright for the disaster she left behind. Marcus stumbled after her, breath shaking, world collapsing in real time. Ethan Ward, 42, longtime investor, watched him with a disappointed shake of the head. Jason muttered quietly, "I warned you." Marcus stopped in the doorway. His chest rose and fell fast, panic swallowing him whole. His lies were falling apart. His affair was exposed. His financial crimes were documented. His mistress had abandoned him. And Elena, the wife he had humiliated, was the one now holding all the power. He sank against the doorframe, unable to breathe. At that exact moment, his phone buzzed. A message from Elena's legal team. The subject line alone froze his blood. Notice of divorce proceedings and asset investigation. Marcus didn't walk to Elena's new corporate building he ran. He burst through the revolving doors like a man fleeing a burning house. His face was pale, shirt wrinkled, hair messy, breathing frantic. The polished marble floor reflected a version of him he could barely recognize. Desperate, shaken, exposed. The lobby was enormous glass walls, modern steel columns, and a long reception desk where every pair of eyes immediately turned toward him. The intensity of the moment hit him before he even reached the front desk. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. "I need to see Elena Hale. Now." A uniformed security guard, tall and calm, stepped forward. His badge read, M. Turner. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" Marcus shook his head violently. "I'm her husband." Security didn't move. "That does not give you access to restricted corporate floors." "But she's my wife. She needs to hear me out." Security's voice stayed firm. "She is in a confidential board meeting." Marcus froze. Behind the guard, through the glass wall that separated the lobby from the private floor corridor, Marcus could see a large conference room, elevated on the second-level walls made of transparent glass. Inside that room, surrounded by executives, stood Elena Hale, 32. She wore a navy blazer, hair neatly pinned, posture tall and composed. She spoke with confidence, her expression calm and focused, not wounded, not broken, not the woman he humiliated at brunch. Every board member was watching her. Every assistant was taking notes. Every screen displayed her adaptive AI model. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. Just hours ago, he believed he had destroyed her. Now she stood there, respected, admired, powerful. An executive leaned toward her, nodding with admiration. Elena responded with controlled clarity, nothing in her face, revealing the storm she had endured because of him. Marcus pressed a hand to the glass wall, whispering, "Elena." She didn't see him. Security stepped forward. "Sir, you need to step back. I just need 2 minutes with her. Please," Marcus shouted. Employees walking through the lobby slowed down, whispering, "That's her husband? He looks bad. Didn't he?" "Yeah, that's him." Public humiliation. The exact mirror of what she suffered. But now, it was his turn. Marcus slammed his palm harder against the glass. "Elena, please look at me. I didn't know. She lied to me. I made a mistake." His voice cracked, echoing through the lobby. People stared. Cameras on phones began to rise. Upstairs, Elena shifted slightly in her chair. She noticed movement near the glass wall but did not react. Not one muscle changed in her face. She continued speaking to the executives, calm and steady. Her silence toward Marcus was louder than anything she could have said. Marcus's knees weakened. "Elena, please. I'm sorry." Security placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, you're causing a disturbance. Step away from the window." He didn't move. And then, a familiar voice behind him said quietly, "Marcus." He turned. Jason Hale, 31, stood there, face tired, eyes filled with disappointment. He had followed Marcus here, knowing this collapse was inevitable. Jason walked closer, speaking softly but firmly. "She deserved better." Marcus's lips trembled. "Jason, please, you know me. Tell them I need to see her." Jason shook his head. "That's the problem. I do know you." Marcus's heart cracked. Security guard Turner stepped in again, expression sympathetic but unmoved. "Sir, if you don't leave voluntarily, we will have to escort you out." Marcus looked up at Elena one last time. She was smiling now, not at him, not because of him, but because an executive had just praised her strategic plan. It gutted him. "Elena," he whispered, broken. She didn't look down. Not once. His legs finally gave out. Marcus sank to the floor, head in his hands, surrounded by people who now saw the truth he refused to see until it destroyed everything. Jason knelt beside him for only a moment. "She gave you loyalty," he said, "and you gave her lies." Marcus sobbed quietly. In the meeting room above, Elena signed another set of documents that gave her full authority to restructure all contracts connected to her AI platform. At that exact moment, Elena's assistant slipped a discreet envelope onto her desk. Inside was a final report from her legal team, a list of charges, missing funds, and names, including Sienna Cross. And at the bottom of the report, One line waited like a final strike. 2 months later, the courtroom felt colder than any room Elena had ever stepped into. Not because of the marble floors or the stiff wooden benches, but because of the man standing across from her. Marcus Hale, 34, shoulders slumped, hands shaking, eyes swollen from hours of panic and regret, stared at her like she was the last lifeline he had left. The intensity hit immediately. "Elena, please," Marcus whispered, stepping forward before the bailiff stopped him. "Please, just hear me out. I was confused. I made mistakes. She lied to me. You know she did. Don't do this. Don't leave." But Elena Hale, 32, didn't move. She stood still, poised, calm, the same calm she carried in the boardroom, the same calm that came after crying everything out days before. Her navy blazer was pressed, her posture straight, her eyes steady. This time, she wasn't the woman begging to be believed. She was the woman who believed in herself. Judge Cole, 56, known for fairness and a no-nonsense approach, entered the courtroom with files in hand. He took his seat and adjusted his glasses. These proceedings concern the dissolution of marriage between Marcus Hale and Elena Hale. Counsel, are we ready to begin? Linda Perez, 41, Elena's divorce lawyer, stood first. "Yes, Your Honor." Marcus swallowed, his own lawyer nowhere to be seen. He had scrambled to find representation, but after Victor's financial report and his shrinking savings, he walked into court alone. "Elena," he tried again, voice cracking. "Please don't do this. I can fix it. I'll fix everything. I just need you." Linda placed a protective hand on Elena's shoulder. Elena finally spoke soft, steady, unwavering. "You believed a stranger's lies while I was standing right in front of you." Marcus flinched as if stabbed. She continued, voice quiet but strong enough to fill the room. "You didn't ask me. You didn't talk to me. You didn't trust me. And you let her destroy our home." Marcus shook his head desperately. "I didn't know what I was doing." "You knew enough to cut me off financially," she said calmly. "You knew enough to humiliate me in public. You knew enough to believe her without question." Silence swallowed the room. Judge Cole cleared his throat and reviewed the documents Linda had submitted. Bank misuse, emotional betrayal, falsified evidence, and Elena's legal status as the primary asset holder following her billion-dollar acquisition. The judge looked at Marcus. "Mr. Hale, do you contest the dissolution?" Marcus's body trembled. He opened his mouth and closed it. The truth had already spoken for him. "No," he whispered. Judge Cole nodded. "Then I finalize the divorce effective immediately." He stamped the papers. A single sound, sharp, final, unforgettable. It was the sound of Elena getting her life back. Linda handed Elena the exit documents. "You're free," she said softly. Elena exhaled a long, deep breath she had been holding since the day Sienna first spoke her lies. The courtroom doors opened, and Ava Reed, 33, Elena's closest friend, rushed in. She had waited outside the whole time. When she saw Elena's face, she didn't ask a single question. She just wrapped her arms around her. "You did it," Ava whispered. "You chose yourself." Elena closed her eyes, not with pain, but with peace. When the hug ended, she walked quietly toward the exit, not looking back, not needing to. Behind her, Marcus fell into the nearest bench, face in his hands, realizing too late what he had destroyed by believing another woman's lies. Elena stepped outside the courthouse. The air was warm. Not triumphant, just honest, clean, and full of possibility. She looked up at the sky as if greeting a new chapter. Her voice gentle, strong, filled the moment. Voiceover. "They tried to break me with lies, but truth gave me something stronger than revenge, a life without them." Elena walked forward free, steady, unstoppable. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Ready for your first major decision as CTO?" Elena smiled softly. Her story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video. Unaware his wife secretly inherited A $500 million empire. Her husband's family mocked her. At her father's funeral, what happened when the will was read crushed them all. He didn't just fail to protect her. He sat beside his wife of 11 years in a freezing church, fixed his tie, and let his family laugh about the broke truck driver in the $4,000 coffin, while she tried not to fall apart in the front pew. That morning, 9-year-old Ethan Ward thought he was doing his duty as a husband. He showed up in black. He let the Ward family claim the first 3 rows like they owned the place. Next to him, 4-year-old Naomi Brooks Ward, only child, eyes swollen from too many ICU nights, held her father's worn keyring like a rosary and said goodbye to the man everyone thought died with nothing. Behind her, his mother leaned in and whispered, loud enough for cousins to smirk, "At least when this broke trucker finally croaks, maybe our son can stop dragging around his charity case wife." Soft laughter. A joke that the will was probably scribbled on a fuel receipt. Ethan heard every word. The best he could manage was a weak, "Mom, not now," before he went quiet again. They thought they knew the story. Her father, just a failing owner-operator. Naomi, lucky to have married into a real family with a lawyer son. What none of them knew was this. 18 months before his heart stopped, Samuel Brooks quietly moved a $500 million web of warehouses, freight contracts, and industrial land into a trust and named Naomi the sole beneficiary. That same afternoon, after the funeral lunch and fake condolences, the same people who mocked her at her lowest would sit in a cramped conference room and watch Sam speak from a screen. By the time the will finished being read, they'd learned the charity case wasn't begging for their approval anymore. She was holding the paperwork that decided whether their comfortable life survived at all. If you've ever been underestimated like Naomi, don't just watch and scroll past. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this plays out, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. The funeral for Samuel Brooks was held on January 11, 2025, at St. Augustine's in Brentwood. The flowers were modest white lilies, nothing imported, nothing dramatic. That had been Sam's request. No theatrics, save the money for the drivers' families. Naomi sat in the front pew wearing a simple black dress from Macy's that had cost $129 on sale. The hem had come loose that morning. She'd fixed it with clear nail polish in the bathroom while her hands shook. Behind her, the Ward family arrived like they were attending a gala. Ethan's mother, Linda Ward, wore a navy Roland Mouret dress worth $3,200 and a diamond necklace Ethan had financed with a bonus he hadn't exactly discussed with Naomi. His father, Gerald, wore a custom Brioni suit and the smug expression of a man who had already spent money he didn't have yet. Ethan slid into the pew beside Naomi, smelling faintly of Tom Ford cologne and stale coffee. He'd been at the office until 2 a.m., finishing a brief, or that's what he'd told her. His phone, buzzing in his jacket pocket, suggested otherwise. Naomi had seen the name flash on the screen when he thought she was looking at the altar. Chloe B., partner track. The partner track associate who laughed too hard at Ethan's jokes at firm parties. The one who texted him at midnight about urgent strategy questions. Naomi laced her fingers together in her lap so nobody could see them shake. She'd promised her father she wouldn't create a scene at his funeral. Not today. Not yet. Linda leaned forward, voice a sharp whisper. At least you could have done your hair, dear. Sam may have died penniless, but you don't have to look like it. A few heads turned. Ethan coughed. Mom, not now. Linda sniffed. I'm just saying, when your father-in-law leaves you nothing but debt, the least you can do is keep some dignity. Behind them, one of Ethan's cousins snickered. All this for a broke truck driver in a $4,000 coffin. Someone else murmured, bet the will's scribbled on a fuel receipt, if there even is one. Soft laughter rippled down the pew. Naomi kept her eyes on the wooden coffin at the front of the church. Her father's coffin. The man everyone assumed had lost everything in a bad shipping strike and a cancer battle. What they didn't know was written in trust instrument #4B, signed on July 3, 2023, at 10:42 a.m., in a conference room on the 31st floor of the Northbridge Logistics headquarters. What they didn't know was that Sam hadn't lost his empire. He had repositioned it into her name. Only her name. Naomi's phone buzzed quietly in her clutch. A text from attorney, K. Mensa. Reminder, will reading at 3 p.m. Brooks and Mensa LLP. All parties confirmed. Naomi typed back under the cover of her program. Include Ward family and one additional guest. I'll send the name. She hit send, then glanced at Ethan. He was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes glassy, not with grief, but with calculation. He'd already asked her, twice in the last week, if Sam had updated any estate documents. Just so we know what debts we might be dealing with, babe. My parents are concerned. Translation. My parents want to know how big their slice is. Father Michael began the eulogy. He spoke about Sam's early days as a truck driver, how he'd started with one leased semi in 1991 and built it into a multi-state logistics network over 3 decades. The congregation nodded respectfully. They thought they were hearing a story about a man who'd climbed and then fallen. None of them knew the numbers now locked in Naomi's encrypted files. 27 distribution centers in 6 states. Exclusive port contracts worth $78 million annually. A minority stake in a tech-driven freight brokerage app valued at $220 million. Total consolidated valuation as of December 31st, 2024, $512.4 million. Naomi had signed the last quarterly reports herself. As chair of the Brooks Family Trust, working alongside a seasoned executive team that handled the day-to-day operations while she and Sam set direction. Sam gave my son a job when no one else would, Gerald announced loudly during the open mic remembrance, standing to speak without being invited. We're sorry he mismanaged things at the end. But God is good. We'll get through the financial mess. Naomi's fingers dug into the wood of the pew. Financial mess. The only mess was the $430,000 loan Gerald had begged from Sam 2 years ago to shore up the family home equity line after a string of bad day trades. A loan secured by a quietly filed lien that Gerald had never bothered to read. Naomi knew the line number on the document by heart. Lien #2's Arrowed Woe 30 Wone 187, Ward Residence, Cross-Collateralization Rider. Her father had shown it to her and said, remember, the people who treat you like charity when they think you're poor are the first ones who will call you greedy when they learn you're rich. Don't tell them about the trust until after I'm gone. I want to see who they really are. He hadn't lived long enough to watch the fallout, but Naomi would. After the service, as people filed past the casket, Linda pulled Ethan aside. Naomi stepped into the vestibule to catch her breath and heard the words through the half-open door. If Sam had done the right thing and left the company to you, back when it still meant something, we could finally move out of that cramped townhouse, Linda hissed. You're a partner track attorney, Ethan. You shouldn't be sharing a 1,400 square foot place with chip paint and IKEA furniture. We don't know what's in the will yet, Ethan muttered. He might have left something, Linda scoffed. To Naomi, maybe. And then she'll play the grieving daughter card and need time before sharing. You married her for security and look where it got you. You should have listened to me and married someone like Chloe. Her family has real money. Naomi felt that one like a physical slap. She took a slow breath, counted to 3. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Don't defend yourself with words, Naomi. Defend yourself with paper. Contracts last longer than arguments. She stepped back into the sanctuary before they saw her. Ethan pasted on a sorrowful expression, slid an arm around her waist like they were still a team. You holding up okay? He asked, low and gentle. She looked up at the man who'd promised for better or worse at a courthouse ceremony 11 years ago, when she'd been a nursing student and he'd been a terrified first-year associate. Yes, she said calmly. I'm holding up. For now. As they walked toward the limousines, Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time the preview popped clear. Chloe, funerals are depressing. Drinks tonight? I can make you forget. Naomi pretended not to see it. She had something more important to pretend, that she was still the powerless, broke woman the Wards believed she was. What Ethan didn't know was that the original will and 3 codicils already signed, witnessed, and filed with Mensa's office, and the probate clerk sat sealed in a fireproof box downtown, alongside a video file labeled Last Will and Testament of Samuel J. Brooks, Final Codicil. And by 4:15 p.m., Ethan Ward's universe would tilt so violently he'd never land where he expected. The reception was held in the community hall behind the church paper plates, Costco sandwiches, lukewarm coffee, and silver urns. Exactly how Sam had wanted it. Spend the money on the driver's kids' scholarships, not on shrimp, he'd said. Naomi stood near the photo board, accepting condolences from men and women in navy polos embroidered with the Northbridge Logistics logo. They'd driven hours to be here. Long-haul truckers, dispatchers, warehouse managers. "Your dad put me through rehab twice," one driver said, eyes wet. "He saved my marriage." "Mr. Brooks paid for my daughter's braces," a warehouse supervisor added. "Wouldn't take a dime back." Naomi nodded, throat tight. These were the people her father had truly worked for. Ethan, meanwhile, had vanished. She finally spotted him in the far corner near the coffee station, speaking in low tones to Chloe, who stood out in a charcoal sheath dress that was just a shade too tight for a funeral. Chloe's presence wasn't totally inexplicable. Wardlaw had handled a few minor contracts for Northbridge years ago, and she could plausibly claim she was paying respects to a former client's family. But the way she and Ethan stood too close, backs angled toward the room, killed any charitable interpretation. "Just need to get through this will thing," Ethan was saying. "If there's anything left, we'll finally have breathing room. Maybe we can put a down payment on that condo in Santa Monica." Chloe's hand brushed his forearm. "I don't want your father-in-law's pity money, Ethan. I want you free. When are you actually leaving her?" Naomi turned away before she heard the answer. She didn't need to. She already knew the timeline. 4 months earlier, Naomi had been on night shift at the hospital. She still worked 3 days a week as an ICU nurse despite the trust. It kept her grounded and gave her a reason, in Ethan's eyes, to keep her little job. At 3:17 a.m., her friend in billing texted her a blurry photo. Ethan at the hotel bar downtown. Chloe's hand on his knee. The next week, Naomi had checked their shared phone bill online. 412 text messages between Ethan and Chloe in August alone. She'd walked into her father's office, closed the door, and put the phone on his desk. "I think Ethan's cheating." Sam had studied the proof quietly. Then he'd opened his bottom drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Then it's time we talk about Trust 14B, he'd said, 18 months earlier. When his oncologist quietly given him a 40% 5-year survival chance, Sam had restructured everything. Northbridge Logistics had been incorporated into the Brooks Family Holding Company, a Delaware entity. All voting shares, 51%, had been transferred into an irrevocable trust, with Naomi as sole beneficiary and co-trustee with attorney Mensa. There was a clause, though, highlighted in yellow. Section 9, APA, Marital Firewall. Any spouse of beneficiary shall have no community property interest in trust assets, present or future, regardless of jurisdictional default rules. "I'm not leaving my life's work to some son-in-law who treats you like a stepping stone," Sam had said. "I'm leaving it to you, but there's a condition." "What condition?" "You don't tell Ethan until after I die, and you let him show you who he is when he thinks there's nothing to gain." Naomi had stared at the folder. "That feels cruel," Sam sighed. "Cruel as watching a man sit at my dinner table and count my money in his eyes. This is just clarity." Naomi watched as Linda loudly told anyone who would listen that poor Sam had run the business into the ground. "Ethan has been carrying Naomi for years," Linda confided to a cousin. "Mark my words, he'll have to bail her out of her father's debts." Naomi noted every word. Because hidden in the funeral program, printed in 8-point font at the bottom of the back page, was a single line most people ignored. "The family invites close relatives and business associates to a private reading of the will at 3 p.m. at Brooks and Mensa LLP. Close relatives. Business associates." Naomi pulled out her phone and finally typed the extra name to attorney Mensa. Add, Chloe Bennett, Ward Law, LLP. Mark her as professional guest. NDA required on arrival. If Ethan wanted to start his new life with Chloe after cashing in on Sam's estate, they could at least hear, together, exactly what that estate actually was. As the guests began to leave, Ethan finally reappeared at her side, cheeks flushed. "You okay to handle the will thing alone?" he asked. "My parents are pretty drained. I was thinking I'd drive them home and what?" Naomi asked evenly. He hesitated. "And maybe join you later if it runs long." Naomi studied him. The man who'd sat in their 800 square foot starter apartment 11 years ago and cried when she agreed to marry him, even though he had $38,000 in law school debt and no guarantee of making partner. "Dad wanted you there," she lied softly. He specifically said he wanted his son present. Ethan's expression shifted. Son. That was a word he'd always craved from Sam. Okay, he said. Yeah, of course. We'll all go. We. Naomi pictured the seating chart in the wood-paneled conference room downtown. She pictured Ethan's face when Chloe walked in and realized it wasn't drinks, it was a legal proceeding. Micro cliffhangers flickered at the edges of the coming afternoon. What exactly had Sam added in the final codicil, drafted only days before his last ICU admission? How would Ethan react when he discovered that Naomi hadn't just married up into his aspirational ward world, she'd been politely agreeing to live below her means for years? Naomi straightened her shoulders and slid her hand into Ethan's. Let's go hear what my father had to say, she murmured. She already knew. He didn't. By 2:40 p.m., the Ward clan was crammed into the elevator up to the 29th floor of the downtown glass tower that housed Brooks and Mensa LLP. So this is where bankrupt trucking companies go to die, Gerald muttered, eyeing the marble lobby. Naomi swallowed a laugh that had nothing to do with humor. The law firm's top 3 clients were all Fortune 500 logistics conglomerates. Brooks and Mensa didn't bury companies. They built them and kept them out of court. Chloe stepped into the lobby a minute later, confusion flickering across her face when she saw Ethan's parents. I got an invitation, she said carefully. Something about Mr. Brooks' estate and my role as counsel? Naomi smiled politely. I thought it was only fair that everyone who's invested in Ethan's future hear the details. Mensa's office will have an NDA for you at the door. A flush climbed from Chloe's collar up her neck. Ethan's jaw tightened. Naomi, can we talk? The receptionist interrupted. They're ready for you in conference room B. Miss Bennett, if you'll just sign these confidentiality forms first. Chloe signed, hands slightly unsteady. For the last 6 months, Ethan had been living on a spreadsheet in his head. He made $245,000 a year as a senior associate at Wardlaw LLP. After taxes, student loan payments, the mortgage on their 2-bedroom townhouse in Culver City, and the quiet $1,600 monthly transfer he'd been making to his parents' overdrawn account, they were barely saving $1,200 a month. If Sam left even $3.5 million Ethan had calculated, his half through Naomi would transform everything. Pay off his loans, upgrade the house, put a down payment on buying into the firm. Maybe even afford the $9,500. Bulgari Ring Chloe had jokingly sent him a screenshot of at 113 about him one night. Someday when you're free, she'd texted. He now lived in the space between someday and when you're free. He didn't know that 3 weeks earlier, his name had been quietly removed from the backup beneficiary list on Sam's personal, non-trust assets. He didn't know that when he told Linda over Christmas, if Naomi doesn't get anything, I might just file, Mom. There's no point staying in a dead-end marriage and being broke. Naomi's father had still been alive, listening on speaker from his hospital bed while Naomi sat by his side. Naomi had answered the call hands-free while she helped Sam juggle medication cups. She'd tried to lower the volume. Ethan had been louder. Sam had pressed mute, turned to Attorney Mensa, and said, We'll need another codicil. Attorney Mensa had nodded and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Codicil #3 would make headlines if it ever became public. Any spouse or in-law who, in the 12 months preceding my death, expresses intent to divorce or speaks with clear contempt about my daughter's worth, shall be excluded from any beneficial interest in my estate and shall be treated as having predeceased me. Today's funeral whispers would only serve as extra evidence that Sam had read the situation correctly. They took their seats around a long mahogany table. On one side, Naomi, Ethan, Linda, Gerald. On the other, Chloe, trying to look invisible, and 2 of Sam's longtime executives, Ralph Ortiz, COO, and Maya Singh, head of strategy. At the head of the table sat attorney Kofi Mensa, a tall man in his 50s with silver at his temples and a calm that made people nervous. First, my condolences, he said. Sam was not just a client, he was a friend. He slid a stack of documents into the center of the table. This is the last will and testament of Samuel J. Brooks, executed October 14th, 2024, with 3 codicils. Before I read it, there is a video Sam requested I play. He pressed a button on the remote. The screen at the far end flickered to life. Sam appeared, thinner than Naomi remembered, sitting in his office chair, oxygen cannula in his nose, eyes still sharp. "Well," he said, looking straight into the camera. "Well," he said, looking straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, my kidneys finally gave up." "Hi, Naomi. Hi, Ethan." "Hi, disappointing in-laws," Linda gasped. Gerald's face darkened. Sam continued. "I know there's been some confusion about my finances. Rumors that I lost everything. I let those rumors stand because I was curious who would stand with my daughter if she had nothing." He leaned forward. "And I have to say, the experiment has been enlightening." Naomi felt Ethan stiffen beside her. Chloe swallowed hard. She had clearly not signed up for this. The video paused on Sam's face mid-sentence as Mensa hit a key. "We'll watch the full message in a moment," he said. "But first I need to confirm identities." He went around the table checking IDs, making notes. When he got to Chloe, she flushed again. "And your relationship to the decedent?" he asked. "Colleague of Ethan's," she managed. "I was invited as support." Mensa's gaze lingered a fraction of a second too long. "Understood. Thank you for signing the non-disclosure." Ethan's leg bounced under the table. Naomi counted the beats. 1, 2, 3, just like she'd done during her father's chemo infusions. "So," Mensa said, folding his hands, "shall we see what Sam decided to do with $500 million?" Ethan's foot stopped. The video resumed. "I'm sure you have questions," Sam's recorded self said, smile thin. "Don't worry, I answered all of them for you. Some of you aren't going to like the math." The micro cliffhanger hung heavy in the room. Naomi already knew the answers. Ethan was about to learn them the hard way. On the screen, Sam leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. "I started with one truck," he said. "A 1,991 Peterbilt I couldn't really afford. I hauled produce from Fresno to LA for 12 cents a mile profit after fuel. There were weeks I slept in that cab because rent was optional, but the truck payment wasn't." Flashback. Early years. Naomi grew up in that cab. At 7, she curled against the window with a blanket while her father sang along to old rock songs and explained routing logistics like bedtime stories. "See, MPU, if you time the delivery for when the warehouse opens at 6 a.m., you avoid detention fees. Time is the real currency in this business." By 2005, Sam had 3 trucks. By 2010, he had 40 and his first warehouse in Fontana. By 2018, he controlled 8% of the refrigerated freight capacity coming into Southern California. He kept expanding while everyone said Amazon and Uber Freight would crush the independents. "They're chasing apps," he'd told Naomi. "I'm chasing lanes. Food still has to move from dirt to door." Naomi hadn't just watched. At 19, during her first summer back from nursing school, she'd redesigned the entire dispatch schedule on an Excel spreadsheet that cut idle time by 11%, saving the company $380,000 that year. At 24, she'd negotiated her first port contract for $6.8 million annually when a competitor dropped the ball. At 28, she'd suggested investing $2 million in a fledgling freight tech startup instead of buying more trucks. That stake was now worth $48 million on paper. Sam's video gestured off-screen, where Naomi knew the trust binders sat. "All that work, all those nights Naomi spent helping me run numbers instead of going out, all the compromises she made so I could chase this, belonged to her, not to anyone who married in and saw dollar signs." Linda slammed her palm on the table. "This is outrageous. We supported Naomi through that whole time. Ethan could have married anyone." Sam's recorded voice cut across her outburst, not in real time, but like he'd anticipated every argument. "I know some of you think you did my daughter a favor marrying her," he said. "That she married up into your country club world." Naomi saw Ethan flinch. That was a phrase he'd used once, drunk, at a partner retreat. He hadn't known the bartender was one of Sam's driver's cousins. "I heard, through various channels," Sam went on, "that my daughter has been introduced as a nurse like it's a hobby, while my son-in-law's title gets trotted out like a trophy." Naomi remembered that night vividly. Wardlaw holiday party, December 2022. "Everyone, this is my wife," Ethan had said, arm around her waist. "She's a nurse, saves lives. You know how it is," one of the senior partners had asked. "And your family does trucking?" Ethan had laughed. "Used to. My father-in-law sold most of it off. didn't really understand the new logistics, tech wave. Naomi had opened her mouth to correct him. Then she'd seen Linda's warning look across the room and swallowed the truth. "You let him say that?" Sam's video said now, looking right at Naomi through the camera. "Because you're kind, because you didn't want to embarrass him. But I will." Sam shuffled some papers. As of last audit, the Brooks Family Holding Company owns controlling interest in assets valued at $512,400,000. That includes warehouses, equipment, contracts, and equity stakes. It does not include the cash I've already donated to scholarships and driver benefits. "The day my heart finally gave out," Sam said. "Every voting share in that holding company passed fully into Naomi's hands through the trust. She didn't marry into this, Ethan. She inherited it." Chloe's eyes widened. She did the mental math faster than Ethan. "500 million, she whispered. Gerald sat up straighter. Linda's anger morphed into greed. "Well," she said, smoothing her dress, "as Naomi's husband, Ethan will of course." Sam's recording cut in again, voice suddenly icy, as if he'd heard that exact sentiment 100 times before. "No, he will not." The room went very still. "This is where the lawyers come in," Sam said. "Mr. Mensah, would you explain Section 9C? Mensah cleared his throat and flipped to a tab page in the thick binder. "Section 9C, Marital Firewall," he read, "states that any assets in the Brooks Family Trust, including future reinvested profits, are deemed the separate property of the beneficiary and shall not be subject to community property claims in any jurisdiction." In plain English, Sam added on screen, "You don't get a dime because you're married to her. If Naomi wants to share, that's her choice, not the state's." Ethan swallowed. "That's not how California works," he said weakly. "Community property?" Mensah met his gaze. "It is when a spouse signs a separate property agreement and a Delaware Asset Protection Trust is properly funded, Mr. Ward. You signed a post-nuptial waiver before we ever let you sit in on a Northbridge strategy meeting. Your father-in-law planned ahead." Naomi thought back to that day, 4 years earlier, Ethan rushing through a stack of documents. Sam's lawyer had called standard conflict waivers so he could impress a client. She remembered warning him, "You should read those," and his quick, distracted reply. "I trust your dad," he'd said, scrawling his signature anyway. Now, watching him calculate what had just slipped through his fingers, she realized her father had seen further than she had. Sam's video paused again as Mensah hit a key. "You're going to hate me for this one day." Sam's voice echoed in Naomi's memory from the day they'd set up the firewall. "But you'll hate me more if I don't." The video resumed. "Shall we proceed to the specific bequests?" Sam's recorded self asked. "We haven't yet reached the part that addresses recent behavior." Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Recent behavior? He suddenly remembered every whisper, every eye roll, every late-night text to Chloe. And for the first time, he wondered exactly how much Sam had seen. The reading paused for a short break. Linda stormed toward the hallway bathroom. Gerald demanded coffee. Chloe pretended to take a call and fled to the lobby. Naomi stepped out onto the small balcony off the conference floor, overlooking downtown LA's grid of traffic and glass. Ethan followed. He closed the door behind them. "What the hell is this?" he hissed. You knew about the trust?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She watched a red semi crawl along the freeway, its trailer emblazoned with the Northbridge logo. "My father told me last fall," she said. "He moved the assets 18 months ago and looped me in when he realized the chemo wasn't working." Ethan stared. You let me think he was broke. You let him think you loved me," she replied quietly. He flinched. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Scrolled. Pressed play. Her father's office again this time, not a will video. A voice memo Naomi had made 3 weeks before he died, when he'd asked her, "Record this. Mom." Not for court, for clarity. On the recording, Ethan's voice floated faint and tinny from a speakerphone. "If Naomi doesn't get anything, I might just file, Mom. There's no point staying in a dead-end marriage and being broke." Linda's voice chimed in. "You should have married someone like Chloe. At least then you'd have access to real money." The balcony suddenly felt smaller. "You recorded me?" Ethan whispered. "No," Naomi said. "Dad did. He asked me to keep it." She let the silence stretch. You were going to leave me if there was no money, she said. It wasn't a question. I was frustrated, Ethan snapped. I've been carrying us. Carrying us? Naomi echoed. On $245,000 a year and a mortgage my father co-signed, while I worked 12-hour shifts and quietly signed off on warehouse expansions and union negotiations. Her voice stayed calm, but something cold settled behind her eyes. Do you know why I never corrected you when you told people Dad didn't understand tech or that he'd sold everything? Ethan swallowed. Because you were embarrassed? Because I wanted to believe you'd stay even if I had nothing, she said. Dad wanted proof. We have it now. He grabbed the railing. Okay, yes, I said things I shouldn't have, but we can fix this. You can talk to Mensa, change the trust, move some money. Naomi almost laughed. You're not listening, Ethan. I'm not here to negotiate your inheritance. I'm here to execute my father's wishes. She slipped an envelope from her bag and handed it to him. His name was written across the front in Sam's precise block letters. Sam had insisted on addressing the courtesy copies himself. Divorce papers, she said, filed this morning at 9:02 a.m. The process server dropped the official packet at the house. That's your copy, his head snapped up. Before the will? Before the funeral, she corrected. I told Dad I wouldn't let you hang around pretending to grieve a man whose money you were really mourning. He stared at the papers like they might bite him. You can contest, Naomi said. You can drag this out, but what you can't do is touch the trust. That door closed a long time ago. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Inside, through the glass, Mensa was calling people back to their seats. We should go back in, Naomi said. Dad saved the best for last. For once, Ethan believed her. They returned to the conference room. The air felt thicker. The stack of unopened envelopes on the table suddenly looked heavier. For the record, Mensa said, Mr. Ward has been served with a petition for dissolution. That does not affect the terms of the will, but it does intersect with Codicil 3. We'll get there. Ethan's brain snagged on one word, intersect. Lawyers use that when something was about to hurt. Backstory, Ethan's legal reality check. At 8:15 a.m., before the funeral, Naomi had gone to the courthouse with Mensa to file the divorce. A process server had instructions to deliver the official packet to the house while Ethan was at Street Augustine's. At 8:47 a.m., Ethan had been in a different glass tower, meeting with a discreet family law attorney named Hannah Cho, recommended by a colleague, just in case. If your wife inherits, Cho had said, tapping her pen, we'll need to know whether the inheritance is separate or community property. California presumes inheritance is separate, but if funds are commingled joint accounts, jointly titled homes, we can argue transmutation. How much are we talking about? She'd asked. Maybe a few million? Ethan had guessed. He had a trucking company, but I think he sold most of it. Cho had shrugged. Then you might reasonably expect a settlement in the high 6 or low 7 figures, depending on timing and documentation. Ethan had left that meeting thinking in 7 figures. Now, facing numbers in 9, his earlier confidence felt pitiful. Mensa resumed reading from the will. To my dear employees, Sam's video voice said, I've set aside $10 million in a separate fund to be distributed as bonuses and scholarships at Naomi's discretion. She knows who showed up when the rumors said I was broke. Ralph and Maya exchanged stunned glances. Maya wiped her eyes. To charity, Sam continued, I leave $20 million earmarked for driver safety initiatives and healthcare. Ethan's mind barely registered the 8-figure gifts. He was laser-focused on one line he hadn't heard yet. To my son-in-law, it finally came. To my son-in-law, Ethan Ward, Sam said. I leave. Ethan leaned forward. Closure. The word landed like a slap. In Codicil 3, Sam went on, I rescind all previous bequests to Ethan, Linda, and Gerald Ward, including but not limited to the $500,000 I once earmarked as a goodwill gesture for helping Naomi through her nursing degree. That money will instead be added to the employee fund. Linda shot to her feet. He can't do that. He can, Mensa said calmly. And he did. Sit down, Gerald hissed, though his own face had gone pale. Sam's eyes bored into the camera. I considered giving you something anyway, he said. Even after I heard you, Ethan. Tell your mother you'd leave my daughter if she didn't get enough. I thought maybe grief would change you. So I told my lawyer that if, in the last year of my life, I heard contempt instead of care, the goodwill would go where it was actually earned. Naomi remembered the day Sam had asked her to play the recording from his hospital bed. Ethan's voice on speaker, casual and cruel. If Naomi doesn't get anything, I might just file. Sam had listened, jaw tightening, then nodded at Mensa. Write it up, he'd said. She needs the protection. They've told us who they are. Now, in the conference room, Mensa flipped to a tab. Codicil 3 is dated January 3, 2025, he said. 4 days before Mr. Brooks' passing on January 7th. Executed while he was fully lucid, with 2 witnesses present. Ethan's head spun. Longing Hada, oh way. Oh way. Naomi watched him, a distant part of her noting the irony. He, the lawyer, blindsided by paperwork he hadn't read again. At 6:30 a.m., 2 days before Sam died, Naomi had stood at his hospital bedside. Are you sure? She'd asked. You don't have to punish them, Dad. We can just move on. Sam had squeezed her hand with surprising strength. It's not about punishment, he'd said. It's about message. Men like Ethan understand one language, consequence. If he'd loved you when he thought you had nothing, I'd have gladly invited him into the fold. But he chose. Now you choose. What am I choosing? How much of your future you want tied to people who mocked you in advance, he'd replied. I'd rather my money go to the drivers than to a son-in-law who thinks you're a bad investment. Back in the present, Mensa closed the will binder. As executor, I can confirm. Aside from personal items of sentimental value, the Ward family receives no financial bequests. Furthermore, the $430,000 loan extended to Gerald and Linda Ward remains due and payable, as per lien #2023021187. Repayment begins 90 days from today. Linda made a choking sound. Gerald swore under his breath. So we not only get nothing, Gerald said. We owe money? That is correct, Mensa said. Ethan felt the room tilt. His parents would expect him to bail them out. They always had. Only now, there was no imaginary inheritance to backstop him. Naomi sat very still, fingers interlaced. Additionally, as chair of the Brooks Family Trust, Miss Brooks Ward will oversee enforcement of that lien, Mensa said. Whether the repayment schedule is extended or tightened is at her discretion. The implications settled over the table. The house Gerald and Linda bragged about at every holiday, their symbol of having made it, now lived or died on Naomi's signature. He slid the envelope with Ethan's name across the table. Sam requested that it be read aloud. He was very specific. Ethan stared at the envelope. A part of him wanted to walk out, refuse this last humiliation. But somewhere deep inside, the same curiosity that drove him to law school whispered, you need to know how bad it really is. He broke the seal. Inside, in Sam's cramped handwriting, was a 3-page letter dated December 28, 2024. The first line read, Ethan, by the time you read this, you'll have a choice to make about what kind of man you want to be next. The rest would strip away whatever illusions he had left. Ethan cleared his throat. The room blurred at the edges, but the words on the page were knife-sharp. Ethan, he read, when I first met you, you were a kid in an off-the-rack suit with sweat stains and more student debt than sense. You shook my hand too hard and thanked me for taking a chance on a girl like Naomi. He paused. He remembered that day standing in the Brooks kitchen, palms damp, trying to impress the man whose company, he'd later Googled, had more trucks than his entire hometown. I liked you then, the letter continued. You listened when Naomi talked. You asked her about her classes. You ate my terrible stew and pretended it was good. I thought, okay, maybe she picked well. Naomi blinked rapidly. She remembered that same night, the warmth in her father's eyes. Ethan swallowed. Somewhere between that day and now, he read, you decided you were the prize. You decided my daughter was lucky to have you, not the other way around. Chloe shifted in her seat. Linda muttered, this is biased, under her breath. Ethan kept reading. There was no point stopping now. I know about Chloe, the letter said. You should probably pick better restaurant corners next time. Truckers see more than you think. Chloe went utterly still. Ralph stifled a cough that sounded very much like a laugh. I know you judge Naomi for staying in her nursing job, Sam's handwriting continued, because she Could make more money going corporate with my company. You missed the part where she was already making decisions that saved us millions. She didn't need the title. She did the work anyway. Naomi stared at the table. She'd never told her father about that argument. Apparently she hadn't needed to. Here's what you don't know, the next paragraph began. 18 months ago, I put the whole damn thing in her name. The warehouses, the port contracts, the equity stakes, all of it. She became the quiet owner of a $500 million machine and still cooked you dinner while you complained about billable hours. Ethan's throat burned. You thought you married up and then watched me lose my money, Sam wrote. In reality, you married into wealth you never bothered to see because it didn't look like your idea of rich. It looked like my daughter in scrubs, coming home with aching feet and still staying up late to help me model fuel costs. Sam's letter shifted tone on the second page. So here's the choice I'm leaving you with, Ethan read. You can fight. You can drag Naomi through court, try to claw at a trust you'll never touch, spend 3 years paying lawyers more than you'd ever win. Or you can sign the papers she put in front of you, take whatever she offers, and walk away with whatever dignity you have left. Mensa interjected quietly. For the record, Mr. Ward, Missa, Brooks Ward has proposed a settlement of $75,000, half the equity in your shared townhouse, and retirement of any claims either of you might have to the other's future earnings. $75,000. A rounding error in the numbers on the screen. Still more money than some of Sam's drivers would see in a year. Ethan's stomach flipped. He kept reading. If you choose the first path, the letter said, you'll prove what I suspected, that this was always about the money, and you'll lose anyway. The trust is bulletproof. Ask your colleagues. They'll tell you. If you choose the second, maybe there's a sliver of the man I met in my kitchen left in there somewhere. The last paragraph was short. Naomi will be fine, Sam wrote. She has my life's work, and more importantly, the spine to grow it. You, on the other hand, are about to learn whether you can build anything that isn't standing on her shoulders. I hope for your sake you can. If not, at least you'll have a story to tell about the time you almost married into a $500 a million empire and talked your way out of it. Ethan stopped. His voice had gone hoarse somewhere in the second page. The room was dead silent. Naomi lifted her head. I asked Mensa not to show me that letter before today, she said softly. Dad wanted you to hear it in your own voice. Linda broke first. This is absurd, she snapped. We'll contest. We'll go to the media. People will see this for what it is, emotional manipulation. Mensa folded his hands. The trust documents are sealed, he said. The will is private. There will be no media, Mrs. Ward, unless you create it, and I assure you, discovery would not be flattering, Miss. Bennett has already signed a non-disclosure, so nothing leaves this room from that side either. Chloe finally spoke, voice thin. Ethan, did you know any of this? He looked at her, at his parents, at Naomi. He thought about the nights he'd rolled his eyes at Naomi's hospital stories while scrolling through listings for beachfront condos. The times he'd introduced her as just a nurse and watched her swallow 1,000 other truths. And he realized with a sick twist that Sam was right. He hadn't just miscalculated the money, he'd miscalculated Naomi. Mensa slid another document across the table. This is an acknowledgement of service and intent to proceed with the dissolution, he said. You are under no obligation to sign it today. But Mr. Brooks requested that I inform you. Your actions in the next 30 days will determine a small additional bequest that is entirely at Miss Brooks Ward's discretion. Ethan frowned. Additional bequest? Naomi's head snapped toward Mensa. That was news even to her. She knew about the trust and the main will, but not every suggestion Sam had tucked into side clauses. Sam, it seemed, had left one last loop open. What additional bequest? Linda demanded. You said we get nothing. Mensa adjusted his glasses. I said there were no mandatory financial bequests to the Ward family from the estate, he replied. There is, however, a discretionary clause in the trust instrument granting Naomi authority to allocate up to $500,000 in personal settlements at her discretion, independent of the will. Mr. Brooks suggested he did not require that she consider using part of that to assist certain parties if their behavior after his death warrants it. All eyes shifted to Naomi. Wait, Ethan said slowly. So, you could give us something. I could, Naomi agreed. I don't have to. Linda leaned forward. hands clasped. The transformation from sneering to supplicating would have been comical if it hadn't been so predictable. "Naomi, honey," she began, "we've always cared about you. Grief makes people say things. I was just—" Naomi held up a hand. "This isn't about you," she said. "Dad didn't write that condition for you." She turned to Ethan. "It's for him." Flashback. ICU night, 2 weeks before Sam died. Sam lay propped up in bed, monitors beeping softly. "If he surprises you," Sam had said, "if he takes the hit with grace, if he signs and walks away without trying to bleed you, give him enough to start over. A man who learns from a fall might be worth something yet." "And if he doesn't?" Naomi had asked. Sam had smiled sadly. "Then every dollar he spends trying to crack the trust is a dollar he doesn't spend hurting someone else down the line." Back in the conference room, Ethan stared at the acknowledgement form. "This is a test," he said. "Yes," Naomi said simply. "It is." Mensa cleared his throat. "Shall we give you some privacy to consider?" he asked. Naomi nodded. Everyone filed out except Ethan. Even Linda, despite protests, was gently shepherded into the hallway by Gerald and Ralph. Chloe lingered at the door, then thought better of it and followed. For the first time that day, Naomi and Ethan were alone. "You wanted out," Naomi said. "You have the papers. You have the terms. You've heard exactly what you're not getting. What you get now depends on whether you can let go." Ethan sank into the chair. "You think this is easy?" he asked. "Walking away from $500 million? You never had $500 million, Naomi replied. "You had a marriage. You decided that wasn't enough." He flinched like she'd hit him. "I loved you," he said quietly. "At least at the beginning. I don't know when it changed." "You loved what you thought I could become," she corrected. "A partner's wife with inherited capital. But you didn't love the parts that didn't fit your ladder. My job, my father's world, my refusal to play trophy." He stared at the documents. "If I sign," he said, "what happens?" "You get $75,000, half the equity in the house, and a clean break," Naomi said. "No media, no discovery. No one at your firm ever has to know how badly you miscalculated. And if I don't," she shrugged, "then we litigate. You'll lose. And every deposition, every recording, every hotel receipt with Chloe's name will be on the record where any curious associate can find it. You know how discovery works, Ethan." He pictured the partners at Ward Law reading the transcript of Sam's letter aloud at a lunch meeting. Pictured Chloe distancing herself as fast as she'd chased him when he looked like an upgrade. "And the discretionary money?" he asked. "That's not part of the negotiation," Naomi said. "That's between me and Dad." He sat there for a long time. The city moved below them. Trucks, cars, people hustling deliveries. Sam's company still made possible. Finally, Ethan picked up the pen. "This feels like jumping off a cliff," he said. "Maybe it's climbing down from a tower that was never yours," Naomi replied. He signed. Date, initials, signature again. Naomi watched. Something like grief flickered through her chest, not for the money, but for the version of them that could have been. When he slid the papers back, she nodded once. "You'll get the settlement within 30 days, she said. "Mensa will handle the details." He stood, suddenly unsteady. "What will you do?" he asked. "Run my father's company," she said, "and live a life that doesn't require pretending I'm smaller than I am." He almost asked if he could be part of that life in some other way, as a friend, as a something. Then he remembered his own words on the recording. "No point staying in a dead-end marriage and being broke." Those weren't the words of a man who deserved a second role. He left without looking back. In the hallway, Linda pounced. "Well, how much did she give us?" Ethan took a breath. For the first time in years, he didn't give his mother the answer she wanted. "She didn't give us anything," he said. "She gave me a chance not to make this worse. I suggest you figure out how to pay Dad back yourselves." He walked toward the elevator, leaving his mother sputtering. Inside the conference room, Naomi picked up Sam's letter again. One line near the bottom caught her eye, one she hadn't heard out loud because Ethan's voice had broken. "If he signs without a fight, give him $50,000 more from the discretionary fund. Call it tuition for the lesson." Naomi smiled sadly. "Fine, Dad," she whispered. "We'll honor the syllabus." The divorce was finalized on March 28, 2025. The judgment was dry. Naomi retained sole interest in the Brooks family trust and all related entities. Ethan received $75,000 plus $50,000 from Naomi's discretionary fund, wired to a separate account. The Culver City townhouse was sold, profits split. Naomi moved into a modest but secure condo closer to the Northbridge headquarters. Ethan moved into a one-bedroom rental 10 minutes from his office. Ward Law, LLP, found out anyway. Not the details, those were sealed, but enough. Partners noticed Ethan's sudden need for afternoon appointments with his new financial planner. Associates whispered when a Northbridge logistics truck pulled up outside the building one day to deliver boxes of Discovery in an unrelated case, and the driver mentioned the boss lady Naomi with visible pride. "Is that your ex?" One partner asked Ethan after seeing a trade article titled "Nurse-Turned-Logistics Queen: How Naomi Brooks Took Over a $500 million Empire." Ethan managed a tight smile. "Yeah, didn't know you'd married into that," the partner said. "Shame you didn't leverage it." The words hit harder than any insult. He hadn't just failed as a husband, he'd failed at the one thing he'd built his identity around, being the guy who understood leverage. Chloe drifted away within weeks. "This is all a lot," she'd said over coffee one Saturday. "Your ex being a billionaire." "Half billionaire," he'd corrected automatically. She'd winced. "That doesn't help." They'd parted amicably, which was code for she didn't want to be tied to his mess. Naomi's life rearranged itself around a new center of gravity. She kept her per diem nursing shifts once a week now, not 3. "It reminds me why we have health insurance on every driver," she told Maya. "It's easy to forget what a hospital bill looks like from this side of the desk." By July 2025, she'd renegotiated fuel contracts that saved Northbridge $6.2 million annually, implemented a wellness program that cut driver turnover by 18%, and greenlit a pilot program using electric trucks on short-haul urban routes. Trade magazines started calling her the truck whisperer. She hated the label but used the attention. Every profile she redirected toward driver stories, scholarships, and Sam's philosophy. Take care of the people who take care of the freight. The discretionary $500,000 Sam had given her a free hand with, she used $125,000 of it for Ethan, his $50K tuition, plus the original $75K settlement she'd offered anyway. The remaining $375,000 she divided into $15,000, $25,000 grants to longtime employees for down payments and debt relief. "If I'm going to write checks for men's mistakes," she joked to Mensa, "I'd rather most of them be for people who showed up at the funeral for the right reasons." By October 2025, Ethan's life had shrunk. He still made a decent salary, but after paying his share of his parents' loan, he refused to let them be foreclosed on. Despite everything and covering rent, there were no more luxury vacations, no more speculative stock plays. He drove a used Toyota instead of leasing a BMW. He started cooking at home instead of ordering Postmates. For the first time since law school, he tracked every dollar. One late night, bleary-eyed over his budgeting app, he opened a browser tab and typed Naomi's name. Photos filled the screen: Naomi in a reflective vest at a warehouse, Naomi shaking hands with a union leader, Naomi on a panel about sustainable logistics. She looked alive, not polished, not performing, just rooted. He clicked on an article about the Brooks Driver Scholarship Fund, which had just announced a new program for first-generation college students interested in supply chain management. At the bottom was a quote from Naomi. "My father started with one truck. People laughed at his dreams. He never forgot that. This fund is for anyone someone's laughing at right now." Ethan closed the laptop. He thought about the laughs at the funeral. His mother's, the cousins. He wondered how many scholarships those laughs had accidentally funded. One afternoon in November 2025, Naomi stopped by St. Augustine's alone. The church was empty. She sat in the same front pew, where she'd sat on the day Linda called her a charity case. She pulled out Sam's letter. She kept a folded copy in her wallet and reread one line he'd added in a postscript. "Success doesn't change who people are, MPU. It shows you who they've been the whole time." She thought about Ethan, his choices, his signature on the divorce papers. He had chosen the less destructive path when pushed. Maybe not out of nobility, but out of fear. Still, it was something. She lit a candle. For the man he was in your kitchen, she murmured, not the one he became. As the flame flickered, she felt something unclench in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, just release. On December 1st, 2025, 8 months after the divorce decree, Ethan sat at a plastic table in a community college cafeteria, grading mock trial briefs for a group of night students. He'd left ward law earlier that fall. Burnout, politics, and the quiet sense that he'd never outrun the whisper of the guy who blew $500 million had finally pushed him out. Now he taught adjunct legal writing for $4,800 a semester and did contract research work on the side. It wasn't glamorous. It also, for the first time in his career, felt honest. A student dropped into the chair across from him. "Professor Ward?" she asked. "I just wanted to say thanks again for the letter of recommendation. The scholarship committee for the Brooks Driver Fund said it helped." Ethan blinked. "You got the Brooks scholarship?" "Yeah," she grinned. "My dad drives for Northbridge. First in my family to start college. Naomi Brooks came to the award dinner last month. She's intense, in a good way." Something twisted in his chest. "She is," he said softly. The student gathered her books. "Anyway, thanks. I know you've got your own stuff going on, but it means a lot." When she left, Ethan sat there for a moment, staring at the logo on the scholarship brochure, sticking out of her folder Sam's signature truck silhouette over an open road. His life had narrowed, but somewhere along the way, he'd started helping students who reminded him of himself at 22 broke, ambitious, one good break away from a different life. It was, he realized, the closest he'd ever come to building anything that wasn't standing on someone else's shoulders. Across town, in a glass-walled conference room on the 31st floor, Naomi was sketching routes on a digital map. Northbridge had expanded into 3 new states. The freight tech startup she'd championed had gone public, adding another $120 million on paper to the trust's valuation. She still drove her 2016 Subaru. She still rotated shifts at the hospital once a month, charting vitals and reassuring anxious families. On her left hand was a simple platinum ring with a small sapphire. Her fiancé, Jason Cole, an engineer who designed energy-efficient warehouse systems for a fraction of Ethan's old salary, liked to joke that she'd spent more on steel-toed boots than on the ring. "Because I'll wear the boots more," she always said. As they wrapped up a meeting with the scholarship committee, Jason squeezed her hand under the table when the stories got heavy. "Another driver's kid whose dad died of a preventable clot," Naomi said later, back in her office. "We're going to add mandatory screening to their benefits." "Of course we are," Jason replied. "You're you." He'd known about the trust by their 3rd date. Her choice this time had been simple. No secrets about who she was. He'd proposed anyway. Every quarter, Naomi received a brief update from Mensa's office about the ward loan repayment schedule. By December 1st, 2025, the ledger showed original loan, $430,000. Amount repaid by the wards primarily via Ethan's transfers, $430,000. Outstanding balance, $0. Mensa had included a note. "Per your instructions, lien satisfied, no further action." Naomi filed it, then instructed accounting to move the final interest payments into the scholarship fund. "Let's put that toward legal education," she told Maya. "Maybe someone will learn to read a contract before signing next time." She didn't put Ethan's name on the donation. She didn't need to. Later that same day, Naomi spoke at a logistics conference at the same downtown hotel where Ethan had once met Chloe for drinks. Her keynote, "Decent Work in a Ruthless Industry," drew a standing ovation. She stepped off stage to find a small line of people waiting to shake her hand. Near the back, trying to look like he wasn't in line at all, stood Ethan. He'd lost some hair, gained some lines around his eyes. He wore an off-the-rack suit that actually fit him better than the expensive ones ever had. When the last attendee drifted away, he approached. "Naomi," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "Ethan, I saw your name on the program," he said. "I was in the building for a continuing ed thing." "Teaching or taking?" she asked. "Taking," he admitted. I teach now and do contract work. It's different." She nodded. "I heard about the scholarships," he added quickly. "One of my students. Her dad drives for you. She got the Brooks Award. It's a good thing you're doing." Dad would have liked it, Naomi said. A small silence stretched between them. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Ethan blurted. Not for losing the money. For everything else. For not seeing you. For treating you like an investment, she finished. He winced. Yeah. She studied him. The apology wasn't perfect. It was late, but it was real. I'm glad you signed, she said. We both got to start over. He nodded. Are you happy? He asked, then immediately regretted it. It wasn't his right to know. Yes, she said simply. I am. He followed her gaze to where Jason was talking with a group of engineers, laughing at something Maya had said. Good, Ethan said. And for once he meant it without calculation. They stood there a moment longer, two people whose lives had once been entangled by vows and logistics and unspoken expectations. Then Naomi's phone buzzed an alert about a late shipment, a driver stuck at a way station. Duty calls, she said. Always did, he replied. She gave him a small, polite smile. Take care of yourself, Ethan. You too, Naomi. She walked away, joining Jason and her team, already talking about alternative routes and fuel surcharges. Ethan watched her go, then turned back toward the escalators and his continuing ed classroom. He had briefs to grade. She had freight to move. Whatever might have been between them had long since dissolved into what actually was. Two separate lives, shaped by choices and contracts, and the quiet, relentless passage of time. 6 months later, one of Ethan's students, Sam's scholarship kid, would intern at Northbridge. 5 years after that, she'd pitched Naomi a radical new routing algorithm that would save the company another $20 million a year. Naomi would sign the deal on a worn conference table, smiling at the thought that Sam's money had doubled back on itself again. Dad always said the best investments are in people everyone else underestimates, she'd say. Somewhere in a file cabinet, the old will and trust documents would gather dust, their power already fully spent. The real legacy was moving along highways at 65 miles an hour, carried by people who'd never know the drama that once swirled around the name Brooks. As for Ethan, whenever he taught his students about trusts and estates, he'd end the lecture with a quiet warning. Read every clause, he'd say. And don't build your life on money that isn't yours yet, or on a partner you don't respect. He never mentioned Naomi by name. He didn't have to. Some lessons, like Sam's favorite line, didn't need footnotes. Success doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are. Naomi's success revealed a woman who'd rather build than punish. Ethan's fall revealed a man who could learn, if slowly, to stand on his own. And the $500 million empire? It stayed exactly where Sam had wanted it, in the hands of the daughter who'd been mocked at his funeral, but who, when the will was read, crushed them all without ever raising her voice.